Mars opposite Chiron in the natal chart is the wound that fights back. It is a contradiction, a rage that burns but turns inwards. Action met with pain, drive met with a wound that never fully scabs over. This is the kind of placement that makes you aware from a young age that pain is part of movement. Every time that you reach for something or push forward, even assert yourself, you are reminded of something raw and something unresolved. It's like trying to run with a splinter lodged deep in your heel. Every step forces you to acknowledge it, but stopping doesn't remove it either. People with this aspect often develop a complicated relationship with their own anger. Mars wants to act, but Chiron makes it hard to do so. So anger might be swallowed down until it festers and then, of course, explodes in destructive ways. Or it might be externalized, turning every fight into a proxy war for an older, deeper pain. Maybe if you have this aspect, you were taught that your anger was wrong, that your desires were too much, or that standing up for yourself meant suffering. So you learned to stifle it. Or maybe you went the other way, throwing yourself into conflict over and over and over again, hoping that if you hit the wound hard enough, it might finally go numb. Spoiler, it doesn't. This aspect often shows up in people who have been wounded in a way that directly affects their sense of agency. Abuse survivors, people who grew up in environments where asserting themselves came with consequences, those who learned at a young age that standing up for themselves made things could be worse. But here's the thing about Mars opposite Chiron. It refuses to be a victim forever. It fights. The problem is the fight is often tangled in past pain, in battles that don't even belong in the present moment. There's a sharpness to this placement, a survival instinct that runs on muscle memory. It's why some people with Mars opposite Chiron lash out when they feel vulnerable, why they struggle with authority, and why they resist being controlled. But they might, paradoxically, put themselves in situations where they're constantly fighting against something. The wound itself becomes a driving force, something leading them to straight experiences that keep reopening it. There is a self-fulfilling cycle here. Mars pushes towards what hurts, not because it wants to suffer, but because it doesn't know how to exist without the fight. It's a little addicted to the cortisol that comes with it. So healing this aspect isn't about pacifying Mars. It's not about needing to become softer or more healed or more zen about your pain. That's not how it works. The goal isn't to remove the fight from you, but it is to unhook it from the past, to recognize when you've been reacting to an old wound instead of the present moment. So, to find ways to channel that Mars energy without constantly reinforcing the belief that power and pain must coexist. The people who master this aspect are really the ones that learn how to fight wisely, who use their struggle as fuel, but don't let it consume them. They can make excellent activists for this reason, or martial artists. They need to find a place to channel that anger and aggression. It's not about stifling it down, it's about channeling it towards something productive, something that they can actually change. They need to learn that real strength isn't about pushing through pain. It's about knowing when to stop reopening the same wound. The lesson here is learning to transform pain and struggle into something constructive. Instead of letting wounds define your actions or hold you back, the goal is really to channel that raw energy into something that is healing. And so this aspect really demands a deep integration of both the warrior spirit with the healer within, learning to assert yourself in ways that don't reinforce what has been in the past. The first step really is to embrace vulnerability. It's about embracing the vulnerability that comes easily with this aspect instead of fearing it. The tendency to push through pain or to act from a place of anger can be tempting, but it is essential to allow yourself to feel and to express the hurt. Journaling or talking through these emotions with a trusted person can really help release pent-up frustrations and to start healing that emotional scar. Another thing is reframing your pain. This aspect is all about the transformation of pain into power. Rather than seeing past wounds as weakness, use them as sources of strength. Reframing pain as a teacher can empower you to take action with more awareness. Reflect on how past hurts have shaped you and who you are today, and how they can fuel positive change instead of keeping you stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and defensiveness. Channel the anger constructively. Anger is usually a mask for deeper emotional wounds anyway, so learning to channel that anger into productive outlets is key. Things like painting or writing or working on any sort of home DIY project can help release the intensity of Mars while allowing it for healing. And frankly, sometimes it feels good to just hammer things and smash stuff. Another productive outlet could be exercising or engaging in any activity that involves exerting energy, as long as it's done in a way that doesn't lead to self-destructive behavior. Something that has become popular lately is those rage rooms. If you have them in your town, in your city, check them out. You can, take a baseball bat to a fax machine and replay the scene from Office Space. Another thing that is super important here is to create boundaries. This aspect can lead to acting impulsively or aggressively, especially when feeling wounded. So, setting clear boundaries, whether that is emotional, physical, or mental, can help you really manage this energy. By protecting yourself from being triggered into impulsive action, you actually create space for healing without automatically acting from a place of hurt or defensiveness. And practice compassion for yourself and others. Mars opposite Chiron can create a disconnect between the desire to take action and the wounds that cause hesitation. So by developing compassion for your own journey and recognizing the woundedness in others can really foster healing. So by practicing patience and understanding, both with yourself and with others, you can learn to take action that is driven by your growth rather than just simply being defensive. It will be important to take a look at what signs that Mars and Chiron are in. This might change, the wounding just slightly. With Mars, for example, in Gemini and Sagittarius, the struggle between action and pain can take on a particularly intellectual or philosophical edge. Gemini is, of course, ruled by Mercury, and that governs communication and ideas and the way that we process information. And Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and so that governs higher education and truth, the quest for meaning. So when Mars, the planet of action, is opposite Chiron, we have a more mutable energy, and so this tension can really manifest as a battle between the mind, the communication, and a person's sense of truth and honesty. It can also, be about asserting one's beliefs and the vulnerability tied to communication or intellectual pursuits. People with this aspect may feel like they're constantly butting heads with their own ideas, whether out of fear of being misunderstood or a deep insecurity about their right to speak up or to challenge the status quo. So the need for mental freedom and philosophical exploration, really clashes with the underlying fear of being criticized or judged for their thoughts. And this can manifest as frustration or anger, especially when they feel like their voice or their perspectives are not valued. There may also be a tendency to overthink or to overanalyze situations, questioning whether they, what they say or what they believe is truly right or even worthy. And at its worst, this aspect can really manifest as self-sabotage through communication or friendships. People with Mars opposite Chiron, they might hold back their ideas. They might hesitate to speak out of fear of being wrong or rejected. They may alternatively also just speak very impulsively or very aggressively, reacting from a place of hurt or defensiveness instead of asserting themselves calmly and clearly. So the lesson here is to use words and ideas as tools for healing rather than weapons that reinforce old wounds. This aspect really calls for balancing the need to assert one's truth with the compassion that's also within them and the humility to understand others and themselves. So the first step in healing that aspect would be to reframe the way that you think about communication if you have this. Instead of viewing it as a potential source of conflict or self-doubt, see it as a tool for connection and growth. Practice speaking openly about your ideas and your feelings in safe spaces where you can express yourself without fear of judgment. Regular journaling or even therapy can be a great way to sort through these feelings and with not to have to deal with the external pressure of being judged. Mars opposite Chiron often leads to reactive, impulsive communication, saying things out of anger or fear. So learning to pause before speaking can be incredibly valuable. Try counting to 3 before taking a deep breath and responding to heated conversations. Reflect on what triggered you and why, and use that as insight to help calm the emotional charge behind your words. Another thing to examine is limiting beliefs. With Sagittarius involved, there's likely a strong desire to understand the bigger picture and to find a sense of meaning. However, there may also be a deep-seated belief about your ability to assess that truth or to communicate it. You may begin to examine your own limiting beliefs about knowledge and communication. Do you have to know everything before speaking, or can you just speak? Do you feel like you're going to be judged for being imperfect? By challenging these beliefs, you can free yourself, to speak more openly and authentically. Engage in intellectual exploration. Mars in Sagittarius craves expansion and growth through higher learning. So to heal this aspect, engage in intellectual pursuits that stimulate your mind without the pressure to prove anything, whether through reading or taking a new course or joining a discussion group. You allow yourself the freedom to explore new ideas without the fear of being wrong. And this will help you embrace your curiosity and your intellect without letting old wounds really control your voice. With Mars opposite Chiron, it's really easy to feel like you need to fight for your perspective or defend your beliefs. However, healing comes through understanding and empathy, so practice active listening, whether that is in conversations with others or even in an inner dialogue with yourself. Listen to the unspoken emotions behind the words and ask questions, things that foster deeper understanding rather than just reacting. Now, when Mars is opposite Chiron in Scorpio and Taurus, the tension plays out between the need for physical security and comfort, and of course the drive for deep emotional and psychological transformation. Taurus is the sign of stability and sensuality and material comfort, and it seeks to create a solid foundation and to find peace through, the tangible physical world. So in this opposition, the conflict may arise from a fear of losing what feels secure and safe in Taurus, and the deep emotional pain that requires transformation and healing through Scorpio. So individuals with this aspect may struggle with internal battles over whether to hold tightly or to material or emotional stability, and when to let go and allow deep change to occur. So this dynamic can manifest as emotional resistance to change or, even an urge to suppress difficult emotions in order to maintain security. So, we're working on embracing the power of sensory healing here. Taurus is an earth sign, and it's deeply connected to the senses and the physical world. So to heal these wounds, you might want to engage in, sensory healing practices, things that ground you and help you connect into your body. Activities like yoga or massage or gardening or simply taking a walk in nature can really help soothe the tension between Mars and Chiron. These practices can offer comfort while also allowing you to slowly process the emotional pain that might be harder to assess in more intense ways. Another thing that they can really do to work on this is to balance stability and change. The key to healing this opposition is to learn to find balance between your need for security and your need for transformation. So the challenge is not to let one side dominate. Instead, allow yourself to make incremental changes over time. Small steps towards letting go of what no longer serves can help allow for the emotional depth and the healing that Scorpio demands, without losing your footing in the material world. So embrace gradual change rather than, sudden upheaval. It's also important to release attachment to material security. One of the core lessons here is to recognize when your attachment to material security or comfort becomes a hindrance to emotional or spiritual growth. So examine where you might be clinging to objects or financial stability or certain relationships out of fear rather than necessity. Releasing these attachments in small ways can help you free up the emotional space for deeper healing. Scorpio is all about transformation through confronting pain and shadow. So the challenge here is really not to shy away from emotional discomfort, but to face it directly. Acknowledge the ways in which past wounds are holding you back from fully living, whether that is through therapy or journaling or guided introspection. Allow yourself to work through pain without the need to suppress or avoid it. Scorpio's power lies in the ability to turn pain into power through understanding and catharsis. Now, it's important to also transform anger into constructive action. Mars's fiery energy often leads to anger or frustration when it feels blocked or restricted. So with, Scorpio and Taurus on the axis, it's important to channel this energy into constructive actions that lead to healing and growth. So that might be creative projects or physical exercise or finding a cause that aligns with your values. The goal is to transmute that intense emotional charge into something purposeful and empowering. So by integrating these healing practices, individuals with this aspect in their chart can really begin to reconcile their conflicting needs. And over time, they can learn to use, their ability to transform their wounds into triumphs and inspire other people around them. Once we have really mastered the Mars-Chiron opposition, we have the ability to really empower communities and to become healers ourselves. We see a lot of healers who have this aspect natally in their chart because they turn their tragedies into triumphs. And I'm telling you right now, if you have this aspect in your chart, you are definitely here to do the same. So learn how to empower yourself. Your anger is not a weapon. It can be. But here we're working on it becoming an asset rather than a hindrance. Rather than a weapon, it's a tool for change and a tool for healing.